The first thing that you have to sacrifice to become part of the government is Palestine. The repression of the German state is no sign of its strength. It is losing the argument, and it has to use brutal force against the Palestine solidarity so it doesn't spread. This is not a conflict between Jews and Palestinians, or Jews and Muslims, or Jews and Arabs, or anything, but it's a colonial question, and a question of oppression, and a question of human rights. It doesn't matter whether people are Jewish or non-Jewish. We'll fight together and build up resistance. We will keep on growing, and they can't silence us and forbid Palestine solidarity. So in Germany, there has been state repression against the Palestine solidarity movement for many years, including demo bans on any demos that are somehow related to Palestine solidarity. We had that for several weeks. And also the bans on certain rooms and places, people losing their jobs, media smear campaigns. And one of the media smear campaigns was the campaign against the Palestine Congress in Germany. There was weeks of labeling it as hate Congress of anti-Semites. That was a shame for Berlin and so on. The speakers were attacked. They were already trying in the Berlin Senate to forbid it and to ban it before it started. They didn't find legal ways because there are no legal ways according to German law. Of course, it's unconstitutional and a blatant assault on fundamental democratic rights of freedom of speech and the right to assembly, what they are doing when they are repressing the Palestine solidarity and also the Palestine Congress. There are politically motivated deportations. I mean, for example, against members who had some ties to the PFLP or Sormidun. This definitely happened, like Khaled Barakat was deported from Germany, for example. Rasmea Ode was also deported when she tried to enter for an event. And the court case was actually won by her lawyer against the German state, and that it was unlawful what they did. But when it comes to cracking down on Palestine solidarity, the German government doesn't care whether it's constitutional or legal regarding fundamental rights in Germany. And there are pushes also to deport people and make people lose their refugee status. because of alleged anti-Semitism. And in Germany, anti-Semitism is already being seen as criticism of Israel, simply like, and criticism of Zionism and so on. So they really use that to crack down on Palestine solidarity, and those who are in solidarity with the Palestinian cause are smeared as anti-Semites. So that's also what it means for refugees. So there was always discrimination and repression, but it got increasingly worse. And I would say like the main thing that triggered was the strengthening and the growing Palestine solidarity around the world and also in Germany. One very important event was the demonstration against the ethnic cleansing in Sheikh Jarrah in 2021. Even in Berlin, there were 15,000 on the streets, and that's when they started to increase the state repression. And in 2022, in April, end of April, they started with the first demo bans. Back then, only in Berlin, but in October 2023, they also did it in other cities like Hamburg, in cities in NRW, and many more. So the repression of the German state is no sign of its strength, but that it is losing the argument, and that it has to use brutal force against the Palestine solidarity so it doesn't spread and reach more people, because many people in Germany actually do not agree, according to polls, with the position regarding Israel its own government has, but are too afraid to speak out most of the time because of this severe repression. So I would say with the growing Palestine solidarity comes growing repression against it on state level. One very important factor was also the anti-BDS resolution. I think it started in 2019, if I'm not mistaken, but definitely some few years before Sheikh Jarrah was trying to be evicted. And it was like the time when they used this, even though it was also not legal, what they did. In the Bundestag, like almost all parties supported this motion against BDS to defund rooms for it. And it also had consequences in activism, because many rooms denied BDS activists or Palestine solidarity activists in general to use their rooms, always like referring to this motion. And it actually even, it even was directed then in Munich at the Jewish Palestinian dialogue group, which tried to show a movie on the situation in the occupied territories. And one of the examples there was also the segregation wall. And then the Berlin city mayor and so on argued that the segregation wall and the dismantlement of this segregation wall is also in one of the three demands of the BDS movement. And because this is being shown in the film, there is some connection to BDS and it has to be forbidden. So that's how they work. They orchestrate these bridges to the back then boogeyman BDS. Of course, the boogeyman today is more like Hamas, but their aim is always to shut down any Palestine solidarity and to keep people here from talking about Palestine. And that's also the driving factor behind the ban and the crackdown on the Palestine Congress. Their aim was to stop people from being informed on Palestine. Mm. So the German state instrumentalizes the memory of the Holocaust and this, so-called guilt to drive for its national economic and geopolitical interests in the region, actually. We are talking about one of the gas and oil richest regions in the world. And Germany has cold calculated economic interests behind its support and its unconditional support of the Israeli state. So they, in an anti-Semitic fashion, equate the state of Israel with Jews worldwide, even though like the majority of Jews doesn't even live in Israel, and not all of the Jews in the world support the state of Israel or Zionism. And Germany equates these both things. And I think it's not so much, actually, at least for the ruling class and the German government, about shame or guilt, but it's about nationalism and German world ambitions. Because by this orchestrated clear cut with German history and the Holocaust, they can now again be respected as a world power in the outside world, and also like construct an other within. So the other, of course, is Palestinians, but it's also Arabs and Muslims in general, and it's also anti-Zionist Jews who dare to speak up against this so-called Staatsräson, it's called here. So like the main and driving ideology of the German state. And this driving ideology is the unconditional support of the state of Israel. And they instrumentalized the memory of the Holocaust to legitimize this. And they don't draw universal learnings from the Holocaust. Never again to anyone, never again to genocide, no genocide against anyone. But they say, yeah, the learnings are we must unconditional support the Israeli state because of what we have done to the Jews. And it's not, it seems maybe in the beginning to the outside world as a very self-critical view of German national history. But in the end, actually, it is very like nationalist, and that we can even be proud as Germans again in Germany to have learned so much from our past, and we know best what anti-Semitism is. We know best what genocide is, and we could see that very clearly also with Germany's interventions in the international courts of justice and so on, where Germany and the German state tries to paint itself as the one who knows uh, best, as the one that knows best what anti-Semitism is and what genocide is and what is not. So it is clearly nationalist and imperialist driving factors that make Germany act the way it does. And it's not really like shame due to the Holocaust. So the first thing that you have to sacrifice in order to become part of the government is Palestine and Palestinians, because of this state ideology of Germany that I told you about. And the Die Linke is a left reformist party, so it wants to become part of the government. At least its leadership wants that. And to be accepted by the other parties like the Green Party and the SPD and so on, they want to have a coalition government with, they have to sacrifice Palestine solidarity as the first thing and condemn Palestinians and so on, and stay in unconditional support of the state of Israel regarding like this state ideology of Germany. So that's why they often give these horrible comments and support horrible motions regarding this. You also have this tendency within the German radical left you talked about, for example, St. Pauli and so on, that is called, ironically, anti-Deutsch, anti-German. Even though it's the most German thing that exists, you don't have these tendencies within other international radical left spaces, but only in Germany. It, yeah, anti-Deutsch, that's the name. And
Yes.
it developed in the 90s as a self description, anti-Deutsch, after the after the decreasing development within the new German left, and the left got way weaker, and you had also the Wiedervereinigung, the reunion, so-called, between East and West Germany. And the left in Germany was in a very weak position and also adapted to certain ruling class and government ideas and state ideas. And one of them is this state ideology of unconditional support for Israel. So the anti-Deutsch especially like draw from the national history and say, yeah, Germans were against the Jews, now we are with the Jews, and equating Jews with Israel. And the US supports the Israeli state, so some of them are even like running around with US flags and so on, if you can imagine, as like radical leftists, and are celebrating like these imperialist states.
Yeah.
So it's a very crazy and surreal tendency within the German left. But also, I have to say, it's becoming weaker and smaller. And many of them are actually like opening, going into right-wing press and media and so on. They are making their way to the right wing often. So this is a phenomena we have in Germany here, that many leftists in the outside world can't understand, but it's coming from like German historical developments, and they are no real leftists. That's a very important factor. They may be like liberal and progressive on certain issues, but when it comes to fundamental questions, also regarding the German working class and so on, they really despise them, actually. And so they are in many cases, in many questions, actually reactionaries, but don't really seem to, uh, yeah, seem to accept this and try to paint themselves as leftists, but less and less, and more openly going to the right by now with the growing international solidarity movement. There was one song by an anti-Deutsch band, um, and one line was, um, surprise, also Greta hates Jews, referring to Greta Thunberg, like the leading figure of the international climate movement, Fridays for Future, painting her as a Jew hater. So they are like alienating more and more from the international progressive and leftist movements. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there is a lot of media racism against Palestinians in Germany. There is also a lot of racism against Muslims, against Arabs in general, but there's also something specific about anti-Palestinian sentiments and anti-Palestinian racism in Germany, because anti-Palestinian racism tends to delete the existence of Palestinians in general and tries to deny that they exist, and also calling them barbarians and so on. So we had like the biggest German newspaper, Bild, publish an article saying that the barbarians are among us, with Palestinians on the cover. So that's the level of racism you have in German media here. It's very open, it's very blatant, and it also has effects, of course, on society and the ideas in German society, because most are reading these newspapers, and they have a lot of impact, of course, on society. So growing up as a Palestinian in Germany, many of us witnessed from an early age, even in kindergarten and school, if you can imagine, that we were not allowed to call ourselves Palestinians, that we would directly be confronted by teachers and so on if we bring our food and describe it as Palestinian, if we draw our flags as or so on, or call ourselves, if someone asks, where are you from? I'm from Palestine, or I'm Palestinian, that Palestinians don't exist. And this was always like this um, elimination of our identity was always there, but it like fully broke out after October, where you had graffiti on schools in Germany saying "kill all Palestinians," where you had also emails and so on to Palestinian restaurants and shops saying that they should all die and stuff like this. So it became a logic of extermination. Like before, it was deleting the identity, but now it like escalated and radicalized in certain minority sectors of German society and the right wing into a logic of extermination of Palestinian human beings in general and as a whole. So uh, uh, anti-Palestinian racism in Germany is horrendous. And I've talked about it for a long time and been seen as an expert and like really promoting this term also. Um, I myself also, of course, had lots of experience with anti-Palestinian racism and bigotry and so on. Um, so it's a very special kind, because you don't have that usually for other, like Lebanese, for example, or Jordanians or Egyptians. Even though you have racism against them, it is not common as for Palestinians to set them in quotation marks, for example, so-called quote unquote Palestinians. But that is a very common experience we make as Palestinians in Germany, and many are really oppressed and discriminated against. We have around like 200,000 Palestinians in Germany, it is said. Yeah, 200 to 300,000. It's not easy to estimate because you have a lot of Palestinians without any citizenship or come from Lebanon or Syria and so on, and where it's not very easy to categorize. And especially in Berlin, there's a very big community of Palestinians. And the main Palestinian inhabited street by Palestinians in Berlin, its name is Sonnenallee. It was really shut down, and it was an occupation-like atmosphere there after October. You had riot cops every few meters. On New Year's Eve, they even built a checkpoint to check who comes in and who doesn't. Um, it was like an import of Israeli occupation to this Palestinian area in Berlin. And with the demo bands and so on, you had riot cops and police overpainting the Palestinian flag when people um, painted it on walls. You had them climbing trees to get down Palestine flags and so on. The kufiya, the Palestinian scarf, was forbidden in German schools in Berlin. So Palestinians had to hide their identity. And on the street, these patrolling riot cops were racially profiling anyone they saw. And when you were wearing a kufiya or had something that looked Palestinian, like a watermelon or the colors of Palestine on your shirts, or just looked Palestinian from your skin color and hair color, they would like take you, sometimes take people in custody, beating people up and so on. There was a lot of police brutality. In one occasion, even a 13-year-old boy was beaten unconsciously by police. So there was a horrible level of police brutality and racism by police against especially Palestinians and those who they thought of being Palestinians. So maybe that gives you some insight in anti-Palestinian racism in Germany. Um, so, yeah, first of all, I think many internationals before thought of Germany as being a very liberal democracy, thinking of Merkel and the refugee crisis, where they let in so many refugees from Syria. And Germany also painted itself as a very like cosmopolitan, open to the world country and so on. Um, but now the mask slipped and the mask has fallen down, and I think that's very important because when I was um, uh, in other countries in the world, many people like had these thoughts. I think it is slowly shifting, and people are seeing and understanding that it's a facade and it's a farce, and that behind that there's a very like authoritarian state in Germany. Um, and when it comes to cracking down on Palestine solidarity and yeah, just disrespecting fundamental rights on anything, basically, the German state always argues with its concept of being a militant democracy, so that it will crack down militantly on anything that's apparently against democracy, even yeah, disrespecting fundamental democratic rights in this process. So very ironic concept. But that's how the German state legitimizes it. When it comes to UNRWA, um, there was a media campaign before that, of course, here using the Israeli propaganda, trying to label UNRWA with Hamas. By now we know that they tortured UNRWA workers and so on to force them into making such claims, for example, and so on. And we know that it was all just a way to get rid of the humanitarian support and the aid coming into the Gaza Strip, and Palestinian refugees being supported, which shows their clear intention of genocide, very clear. And the German government, of course, of its unconditional support of the Israeli state, was on board right away. And all the government parties, so the current government is constituted of the Green Party, the SPD, and the FDP, the neoliberal party, and they all supported it, like dismantling its financial support of the UNRWA. But there were certain critical statements by Die Linke, so the left party. So the support of Die Linke for the Israeli state is more like contradictory, and there's some voices against it. There's still a big pro-Palestinian base within the party and so on. And when it comes to these like hard questions where Germany really like, is against even humanitarian aid for Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, Die Linke can't like really go that step, even though it has made horrible concessions on Palestinian rights. But yeah, so the right wing, of course, supported it for a long time, and the neo-fascist party in Germany, the AfD, Alternative for Germany, is among the most pro-Zionist supporters, fully for state repression against any Palestine solidarity, and like really militant support of the Israeli state. So that's interesting because you have some a Nazi core within the party, but they still also look to Israel as a very like institutionalized racist regime and ethno-state that they also want to establish, and so they see it little bit as idle, and also this militarization in Israel and so on. That's the one hand, the ideological, and of course they also have a tactical relationship to Israel, because they say, yeah, we can't be anti-Semitic if we are pro-Israel, even though they are anti-Semitic still and have that tradition in Nazi history and so on. So these are like the parties and how they reacted to this UNRWA decision. Yeah. Our ties between the Jewish groups like Jewish Voice for Peace or Jüdische Stimme and Palestinian groups are very close, and we work together and cooperate a lot. It was also very clear that at the Palestine Congress, 2 of the 3 people who were taken in custody were Jewish, and one was taken into custody by police because the person had a sign reading Jews against genocide. So there is a small like activist group of Jewish anti-Zionists being critical of Israel and so on, also within the Palestine movement, and we're working together with them because this is not a conflict between Jews and Palestinians, or Jews and Muslims, or Jews and Arabs or anything, but it's a colonial question and a question of oppression and a question of human rights, and we are on the same side in this regard. So it doesn't matter whether people are Jewish or non-Jewish. We'll fight together and build up resistance. And I'm very happy to say that we resisted. Despite all the state repression and all the crackdowns and everything they banned here and they forbid, and the police violence and brutality and so on, our people resisted in Sonnenallee. They broke through the demo bans. After few days, they resisted it. They did very creative actions on the streets. They built blockades. They used fireworks. They painted graffiti all over. They didn't accept to be for their identity to be annihilated. And I'm very moved by how the people build up resistance here from below, despite all the pressure, despite all the government repression, the police brutality, and the media smear campaigns and propaganda here in Germany. And we are trying to build upon that. There are many, many groups, of course, like revolutionary leftist groups that are supporting the Palestinian struggle. Palestinian groups like Palestine Speaks is, I think, the biggest and most well known in Germany, which I'm also a member of. And then you have Jüdische Stimme, Jewish Bund also, different Jewish groups. You have Palestine Campaign, you have different like Palestine solidarity groups in all of Germany. And that's the struggle we are leading at the moment, and we are growing. We are 5 years ago we didn't have like university groups to large extent, also consisting of German students that were working like as a central issue for them on Palestine, like Palestine solidarity groups in all cities basically, and all bigger relevant universities. So this is a new level of resistance we have built up against the German support of the state of Israel. And I'm content that we will keep on growing and that they can't silence us and forbid Palestine solidarity, because we also have international solidarity. And I'm also very happy and glad that you gave us the opportunity to talk about this, because international solidarity is our weapon against this state repression.